Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the news report for day 343 on the war in Ukraine. You are listening to The Account. Since nothing major was reported today, I grouped all minor news updates into the usual situation inside Ukraine, including information on the ongoing corruption scandal, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments, including some interesting possible military supplies for Ukraine. And to start the report, as usual, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. The situation is quite frankly bad. Despite Ukrainian reinforcements, Russia continues to advance. Bakhmut is an important prize for Russian propaganda, and the Russian military is flooding the area with troops in hopes of finally achieving victory. An aide to Denis Pushilin has claimed that Bakhmut is in an operational encirclement. However, that claim is unverified. The General Staff of Ukraine, meanwhile, is reporting that Russia is paying a bloody price for Bakhmut, suffering heavy losses. The main focus now is on the H-32 highway between Chasiv Yar and Ivanivske, marked here. Vuldar. Ukrainian artillery is keeping Russian forces pinned down around Mikilske and preventing them from advancing. So far, all Russian attacks have ended in costly failure. And to start the news segment, a look at all the minor news out of Ukraine. Alexander van der Bellen, President of Austria, has arrived in Kyiv for a visit. While Austria yesterday announced they will not send military aid, the delegation has brought much-needed power generators with them to help civilians. During his visit to France, Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov, together with his French counterpart, has met with Ukrainian defenders undergoing treatment and rehabilitation in France. President Volodymyr Zelensky may come to Poland to meet with his American and Polish counterparts when the US president is in Europe on a visit. The Ukrainian president is planning to present his 10-point peace plan during the meeting. During a meeting today, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine fired Vyacheslav Demchenko, acting head of the State Customs Service, and his deputies Alexander Shutsky and Ruslan Cherkassky, as well as Tetiana Kiriyenko, acting head of the State Tax Service. As a reminder, Ukraine is currently purging officials under suspicion of corruption. Oleksiy Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, stated that Russia is preparing for maximum escalation, gathering all possible forces, and therefore the most difficult battles are still ahead, and the next few months will be decisive in determining the course of the war. According to him, Russia may be planning to attack from the north, south, and east to coincide with the anniversary of the invasion. However, Ukraine also has plans worked out. In the evening, a Russian missile hit a residential apartment block in Kramatorsk. At least 2 civilians were killed and 7 injured, but more remain likely under the rubble. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. According to Ivan Fedorov, the mayor of Melitopol, a large-scale fire has broken out near a Russian military base on the premises of the Revma factory. No further information is currently available. The National Resistance Center is reporting that Russian authorities are having trouble finding personnel willing to work in the administration for Kherson Oblast. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Russian President Vladimir Putin has asked the Russian Ministry of Defense to focus on preventing the shelling of Belgorod Oblast and called it a priority task. Andriy Yusov, spokesman for the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, has claimed that some people in Russia are calling Russian President Vladimir Putin a foreign agent, as few people have done more damage to the Russian Federation than he has. The Ministry of Defense of Belarus has shared photos of their new Iskander missile systems. Belarusian soldiers have already undergone training for the system in Russia. As a reminder, the Iskander system has a range of 500 kilometers. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. A US weapons maker is offering to sell the Ukrainian government 2 older versions of the MQ-9F Reaper drone for $1. The deal would require Kyiv to spend about $10 million to prepare and ship the aircraft to Ukraine, and about $8 million a year for maintenance. Czech President-elect Petr Pavel, a retired NATO general, has said that Ukraine should receive permission to join the North Atlantic Alliance as soon as the war ends. He also said that there should be almost no restrictions on Western military aid to Ukraine. He does not agree that such assistance can be considered an escalation. The Vice-Chancellor of Germany, Robert Habeck, stated during an interview that for the moment it is important to send the promised Leopard 2 and Abrams tanks to Ukraine as soon as possible. However, the topic regarding the supply of Western combat aircraft or ships is still untimely. Representatives of the Russian government were not invited to the prestigious Munich Security Conference this year, as the organizers did not want to provide them with a platform for the Kremlin's propaganda. Instead, 2 high-profile exiled Russian activists were invited. The former chess champion and Human Rights Foundation chairperson Garry Kasparov and the exiled oligarch and opposition figure Mikhail Khodorkovsky. Spain initially plans to provide Ukraine with 4 to 6 German-made Leopard 2 tanks a week after Berlin had authorized its allies to export them. The final amount will depend on the condition of the other 53 tanks that have been in long-term storage. The Bulgarian parliament adopted a resolution recognizing the Holodomor, the man-made famine of Ukrainians ordered by the Soviet authorities in 1932 to 1933, as genocide against the Ukrainian people. According to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel may consider expanding aid to Ukraine, including the transfer of advanced weapon systems, including its Iron Dome. Norwegian authorities are considering sending CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine from the reserves of the country's armed forces. According to Alexei Reznikov, the Ukrainian defense minister, Ukraine will receive 2 GM-200 radar systems from France. The systems are able to track incoming drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. In recent days, some of the most intense shelling in the conflict has likely taken place along the Dnipro River in southern Ukraine. This has included continued Russian shelling of Kherson city with artillery firing from the east of the river. On January 29, 2023, local authorities reported another 3 civilians killed in Kherson, while 2 foreign-owned ships moored on the river were damaged, causing an oil spill. Kherson remains the most consistently shelled large Ukrainian city outside of the Donbas. Russia's precise rationale for expanding its strained ammunition stocks here is unclear. However, commanders are likely partially aiming to degrade civilian morale and to deter any Ukrainian counterattacks across the Dnipro River. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the researchers, the arrival of Russian forces to Bakhmut in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk Oblast has allowed Russia to retain the initiative near the city and offset the culmination of the Wagner PMC's offensive in the area. As a reminder, on December 27th, the Institute assessed that the Russian offensive of Bakhmut had culminated. The report references Denis Yarolavsky, the commander of a Ukrainian unit operating in Bakhmut, who confirmed reinforcements from super-qualified Russian conventional troops. Despite Russian gains, the imminent fall of Bakhmut or a surprise Russian encirclement of Ukrainian units remains extraordinarily unlikely. The assessment on an imminent Russian offensive that will likely take place in Ukraine's eastern Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast still stands. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The enemy is actively conducting reconnaissance, preparing for an offensive in certain directions. Despite heavy losses, the enemy continues to attempt offensive actions in the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Novopavlivka directions. The enemy continues to use the civil infrastructure in the temporarily occupied territory for its own purposes. Thus, the Russian occupiers use the city hospital of Dnipro-Rudny of the Zaporizhia region as a military hospital. Medicines and surgeons were brought from the Russian Federation. The Russian occupiers continue to put pressure on the citizens of Ukraine to violate human rights. In particular, in Starobilsk, Luhansk region, the Russian occupation authorities force people to send children aged 6 and over to a so-called Cossack cadet corps for supposedly proper patriotic education. People who refuse to send their children to the specified corps are threatened with deprivation of parental rights. And that concludes today's report. Should you be interested in any of the articles I mentioned, you can find links to them in the description as usual. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini!